The former President Trump indicted. In fact, it's a charging document that has a lot to it. It's essentially, as I was mentioning to you, it's charges that suggest that the former president participated in a conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election results, and the word conspiracy is in there. And in fact, I think one of the most chilling things about the entire charging document is something that we knew. But boy, when you see it with corroborative testimony that clearly they have, right? They have those who've come in, they've deposed so many people.
It packs a hell of a punch, right?
Yeah, it does, exactly. And so you end up with the clear understanding that they were ready for this to be a bloody coup. And not only on January 6th at the Capitol, but any kind of unrest, civil unrest that could essentially overflow in America's cities, they would use to their advantage to impose martial law. Again, this was talked about in documents. So they're not only trying to obstruct an official proceeding, that's what happened on January 6th, but beyond that, there was an effort to overturn the election in other ways. And that's where the unindicted co-conspirators come in, the Eastmans of the world, Sidney Powell, of course, Giuliani. So the third criminal indictment for Trump is historic. This isn't like the other ones, okay? This isn't like the, and sadly, I was having a conversation with someone last night, and they were saying, well, is this really, is it historic? Oh, it was you. Okay.
It was me. You said it's historic, and I said, "What do you mean it's historic? Guy's been indicted in New York. Guy's been indicted in Florida. Now it's indictments flying from every corner." But you're right. This one's different.
Yeah, this is really the sad fact, though, that because there have been so many indictments, it's a little Trumpian in the same way that he is this fire hose of misinformation and lies. You begin to lose track. Similarly, there's I wouldn't say fire hose, but there have been so many of these indictments, and a lot, to the point that, I mean, this is a former president after all, that you do kind of think, oh yeah, well, they indict him, it's a thing, and you can kind of lose it in the lights. This is historic. And we're talking about a coup attempt here, okay? Everybody, listen, this is a really different, historic thing. And he and his co-conspirators were attempting to regain the presidency or remain in power by any means necessary. That is huge. And the fact that it has been called out in a legal indictment is equally huge. He now faces 3 criminal cases following March's indictment on 34 counts of falsifying business records, June's indictment on 37 counts of mishandling classified documents. He's pleaded not guilty in both cases. There's a separate investigation in Georgia, which is likely to lead to more indictments there. That was the one to pressure state officials, election officials, right, to overturn the results of that election. But the January 6, 2021 investigation on the part of the Justice Department is huge. They say it's the most complex and sprawling investigation in U.S. history. And of course, it gets at the heart of trying to overturn the election. Quote, the attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021 was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. This is from the special counsel. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant, targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government. And these knowing lies are what this document comes back to. The idea somehow, like, well, maybe he really did think he won. They said he lost, but maybe maybe Trump really believed that he'd won. No, it's demonstrably the case here. And again, based on all of these people deposed and all of these people involved in the process, that Trump was well aware of the fact that he lost. But this was a chance, and this was an expressed strategy to overturn those results that Trump himself knew were legitimate results. 4 serious federal criminal offenses. Conspiracy to defraud the United States applies to Trump repeatedly and in a widespread effort spreading false claims about the November 2020 election while knowing they were not true, and for allegedly attempting to illegally discount legitimate votes, all with the goal of overturning the 2020 election. And there's something else I want to say here. There's a sense that I've heard this from like learned people. Well, you know, politicians get a broad berth on what they can say, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff, they oftentimes lie, and they, when it comes to political speech, the First Amendment protects them in a lot of ways. This isn't just about what he said. It's about what he did. It's the conspiracy. He told Mike Pence, and this is in the charging documents as well, "You're too honest." He said those words to Mike Pence when asking Pence to not certify the election, to not go through with that which January 6th was all about, right? It was supposed to be a pro forma thing. It was supposed to be, you know, it really is almost ceremonial. And the fact is, Trump asked him not to go through with it, and said, when Pence pushed back on him, said, "You're too honest." So we know that because Pence was deposed, right? This is how they know that. That quote could only come from Pence because he was the only one in the conversation. It's just Trump and Pence. So it's not just about what Trump said. It's about what Trump did. Obstruction, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. That was brought because of the alleged organized planning of Trump and his allies to disrupt the electoral vote certification. I just mentioned that. Obstruction of, an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. That's tied to Trump and those co-conspirators, again, unindicted so far. I think that's because they want them to flip, I think most certainly. We'll ask John Rothman about that, but I think that seems not to be in dispute. So Trump and his co-conspirators, they actually tried after the November 2020 election, all the way until January 7th, to block the official certification proceeding in Congress. Okay, so that's the other obstruction. Conspiracy against rights. Conspiracy against rights, you probably know this if you're reading around all of this, that's a Civil War era law, and that speaks to Trump and his co-conspirators trying to, quote, oppress, threaten, and intimidate people in their right to vote in an election. So the more you mess with election workers and the more you lean on those involved in the election, you have conspired against the rights of the people, if you will. The indictment lists 6 anonymous co-conspirators. As I mentioned, they're not too hard to figure out. They're given individual numbers and some identifying traits, but they're not identified by name. Some are the attorneys. I mentioned Sidney Powell and I mentioned Rudy Giuliani, and they help promote these bogus election fraud claims. And co-conspirator number 3 is described as an attorney who privately acknowledged that the unfounded election fraud claims were, quote, crazy. Another co-conspirator, number 4, was a Justice Department official who worked on civil matters and, quote, attempted to use the Justice Department to open sham election crime investigations and influence state legislatures. That seems to me, co-conspirator 4, like it might be Eastman. But, so, again, Giuliani, Eastman, Sidney Powell, that guy Jeffrey Clark, you maybe remember him from the J6 hearings. He was the guy in the Justice Department that they were going to make Attorney General because he was in on this. And he was, it was Eastman, I believe, who also suggested actually imposing that Civil War rule that would essentially allow you to retain power and declare martial law if there's unrest. That's why any unrest played into the plans of Trump and his co-conspirators. Trump is calling the indictment fake, of course, and he's still leading the polls. And this is the other part. On Truth Social, Trump said, quote, a fake indictment was evidence of, quote, prosecutorial misconduct. His campaign issued a formal statement, later a fundraising pitch, calling it, quote, election interference. And his Republican allies in Congress, and even some of his GOP primary foes, the Ron DeSantis of the world, cast the indictment as a political persecution at the hands of the Biden administration. That's so odd to me as a play there. You're trying to beat this guy in a primary, but you're afraid to even agree to the fact that he was involved in this. You so want to beat down the Biden administration. And I think you so don't want to run afoul of so many of the Trump supporters. So they're talking about politically motivated charges, et cetera. So, look, here's the sad fact. And this is the second half of this. Donald Trump has such a cult of support. And they have so effectively painted Biden in this dark way. And I know dark Biden is the alter ego of Biden that gets stuff done. But I'd suggest that there's a real possibility that Trump uses this for fundraising. We've seen it before, and he does it effectively. And he uses it for support. And right now, in national polling, it's a dead heat, Trump and Biden. Now, Biden has had a bit of an uptick, but all I would say is it's a tenuous hold, it would seem, that Biden has on any edge that he might maintain over Donald Trump. So you throw in a third-party candidate, and there's no way a third-party candidate is siphoning votes from Donald Trump. As I've said, his support is solid. It's cultish. So the only place that a third-party candidate is siphoning votes is from independents and from those who are on the fence about Biden. Not crazy about him, but rather have him than Trump. Oh, wait, it's Vivek, or it's Bobby Kennedy Jr. So, this is unbelievable. And the last thing I'm going to say about this, I mean, for now, first of all, I'll love to read much of what you've said. Remember when presidents would concede that they didn't win an election for the welfare of the country? Exactly. And Tommy has got the point, which is that there was a sense of duty to the country that just doesn't exist anymore. I think in bare knuckle politics, certainly on the GOP side, this is it. It's ends justify the means. I mean, that's what's going on with the GOP. Ends justify the means. And when you feel as though you're in the righteous battle for the essence of America, against the libs and the, however they characterize the opposition, then the ends justify the means. And so you don't have the concessions on the part of Trump. Now, I will say, though, this is an extraordinary thing, even though you could kind of see that Trump was a wannabe authoritarian and is a wannabe authoritarian. And you also see the fragility on some level of U.S. democracy. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, this thing almost worked. And you can say, well, how can you say that? Well, I'm just saying the next time around, I think there won't be those guardrails up. And some of those guardrails are people who just wouldn't play ball with Trump. Remember the screaming matches in the White House? It was a crew and that was connected to Trump, and I think connected to the GOP, but they didn't feel the personal loyalty to Trump that was required to break the law. I mean, to break the law to that extent. I think if Trump had another shot at it, I think there'd be absolute loyalists surrounding Trump, and you just would not find those guardrails in place that were associated with people doing the right thing. Karen says, it's alarming how many independents don't think Trump did anything wrong. Like 50%. Well, this is the thing when I was getting about the indictments, I was getting at that as well, which is that they can kind of wash over you after a while. You know, like, oh yeah, I know Trump did bad things. So it's a problematic situation for this country, for sure. And it concerns me, and it should concern you and others. Democracies are only as strong as our union, which is tenuous on the best of days, says Huge in Japan. I think also there is a dug-in quality to both sides. It's one of the reasons that it's very hard to come up with any bipartisan legislation on the Hill. And the kind of deal-making that typified American government in past years, it's harder to come by now. I also think that the media and the media cycle has put a premium on rancor and anger. That's what really gets clicks, you know. Rancor's a ding word, by the way. So you end up with a dialogue that produces almost by definition the kind of back and forth that Trump thrives on, right? He lives on anger. He lives on recrimination. He lives on revenge. And so that does animate his base. They love that stuff. And he's a strong man. And I hate to say it, but America feels like a country that is warming up to a strong man. I mean, even literally a strong man. They talk about Biden as, you know, sort of I don't know how they get this infirm. I get it. He tripped over a sandbag and he's, you know, he's hugging 80 or whatever it is. But I'm not looking for the president to do bench presses. I'm looking for the president to forge policies that can take us forward in a very challenging time. Julie says, I think as deep doo-doo as he knows he's in, he absolutely basks in his worldwide attention. I agree with that. You know, all publicity is good publicity. And I've just told you, he's raising money off it successfully. And he's bumping up in the polls. So, you know, it's not just his, I think, personal positivity that he's feeling. He's seeing positivity to all of this in this bizarre world of American politics. So, John Rothman will join us at the bottom of the hour, and I'm anxious to hear what he has to say. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I was going to do Chunk of Trump, and I just got into it, didn't I, Tony? I didn't even bother to. I just felt the calling, and I decided just to go for it. Yeah. Yep. So we're rocking right into it. Mm-hmm. Hey, you may be curious about the judge. Can I share a couple of facts about the judge? And I'm going to do it in a little law and disorder. Still get my law and disorder in.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
Let's meet the judge, U.S. District Judge Tanya S. Chutkan. She is set to oversee former President Trump's case involving his alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The big picture: Chutkan has previously dealt with Trump denying his 2021 motion to halt records from being turned over to the January 6th committee. And in that decision, she wrote, "Presidents are not kings," and plaintiff is not president. So she's not her first rodeo, and she can be tough. Born in Jamaica, she got her bachelor's in economics from George Washington University, graduated from University of Pennsylvania Law School, worked in private practice, joined the law firm of Boies, Schiller, and Flexner. They're very big. You know, Boies is involved in the Bush election. He's been involved in some very high-profile cases. That firm has been involved in extremely high-profile cases. In the January 6 cases, she has set tougher sentences than requested by the Justice Department in a number of cases involving January 6 defendants. They've come to her courtroom. The prosecution gets the judgment against the defendants, and she has slapped actually bigger sentences onto them than they might have received from even prosecution requests. She
Well done.
wrote, there have to be consequences for participating in an attempted violent overthrow of the government beyond just sitting at home.
Right on.
She also denied Trump's 2021 emergency motion to stop the National Archives from turning over his administration's records to the January 6th committee. By the way, randomly selected, okay? Federal judges are randomly selected to handle criminal cases. So that's who she is. She may be tough and fair, but tough is not something that the Trump people want. That's law and disorder.
Tune
In the criminal justice system,
in again next time for more Law and Disorder on the Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.